One, the state has no immunity, not even the judge, because it's not a discretionary issue, it's an administrative issue. Two, you have an automatic right to a jury. They can't try to put you just in front of a judge. Well, this is for when you file a lawsuit, and currently a lawsuit is about the only way to enforce. The Department of Justice is supposed to, but they're over 2 years behind right now. So in order to get the ball rolling, the lawsuits are about the only way to start the process faster.
The courts are
but you have an automatic right to a jury, and you can get both declaratory and financial compensation. And the declaratory is one of the most important ones, because that's where you can tell them that you want orders for these courts to change their rules. You want them to stop doing what they're doing, so you can declare what they need to do. So a declaratory order would be telling them to fix what's ever wrong, but you can do that and a financial assistance, which is currently the only civil rights law which you have all those rights, because otherwise they'll try to railroad you to just have your case heard in front of a judge. They'll try to take your jury away. They'll immune out, or so you can do one or the other, declaratory or financial, but not both.
Well, we need to sue under ADA to force that compensation.
Yes.
Or the ADA advocate.
Yes.
Yes.
But I try to explain to everybody that we need to make this clear, that as families look for us, I need for everybody to understand this is not a small process. Yes, we are basically the enforcers behind all this, and the accountability will be held, but it takes years.
Well, and it might not take years, because this is like an issue also that they're not going to want to have in front of a jury. I mean, they're going to want to correct it once they find out they don't have immunity. So, I mean, in that sense, that's another reason why the ADA way would be the best way, is because it won't be drawn out that long when the immunity is ripped away.
Well, and like with what I was talking about with creating family advocacy and stuff, that ADA is such a really good niche to then create, because if the state has to make ADA accommodations, compensating an ADA advocate would be part of that.
Yes.
What we also do, we are also taught by Dr. Karen Huffer's 8 steps of dealing with just dealing with any kind of primarily post-traumatic stress disorder, because that's usually what we're dealing with in the courtrooms, such as the legal abuse syndrome, which is basically PTSD. So what we do is we actually take a lot of the burden off of the attorneys, because we are that call when the parents are frustrated and the attorneys aren't answering the phone. However, the families and litigants do not understand the timelines of court processes and how much burden that they are put through already trying to deal with whatever trial they could be going through, which are very time consuming. So we also pick up a lot of that slack at a very, very much less burdensome,
Absolutely.
So that the attorney can do their job.
Absolutely.
We can help literally treat a lot of these symptoms that are exacerbated by the court process.
But at Iowa
by
Family
using very, very good techniques.
Preservation Project, we are working on setting things up for a lawsuit. It would quickly become a class act, which takes it out of your hands as pro se, and they appoint an attorney. So at that point, we need to have an attorney we trust in place to take over, because otherwise they'll just give you one of theirs. And then also we do have Dr. Karen Huffer as an expert witness. We have contacts with many other expert witnesses. So when it does come to that stage, we're going to get some forms ready, and probably like a contingency agreement, because as advocates we'll be doing a lot of the work with the courts. And so they can't immune out, but then of course they're going to throw a bunch of other things at you. So you'll have to hurry up and get paperwork done and consult with attorneys or consult with whoever it is that we need to consult with to make sure that our clients are represented well. But we are going to get some forms set up for people to fill out, and then that way it'll make the process easier when it is written up. However, Connie was actually one of the first lawyers who's ever done an ADA lawsuit against the child protective systems, and so I mean I'm so grateful for Connie for seeing that route and understanding it before most of the world was catching on.
Or it could go like this. We're still waiting.
That's where a lot of people get confused, you know, they have such
all
high
the
hopes
same
in us, and it's like,
will apply to all the cases. So if I
they're
get
still
one
gonna
written up,
do what they
you can go in with your own. You can pretty much change the story and change the state or the county or whatever and leave the laws in place. So after one is drafted, the rest won't be so hard.
And ultimately, my goal in that suit, I mean, I want some relief for my client, but it is to get, I'm in the Sixth Circuit, the Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, whatever, and to get, because there's no case law out there that says that ADA applies to Child Protective Services, and there's no case law that says a reasonable accommodation is the involvement of family. I mean, it just seems like a no-brainer, right? But there's no single law out there that says that.
There is some case law to the effect that they cannot force an accommodation on you, and so they cannot tell you who can be your advocate and who cannot. In that respect, it's whoever you feel comfortable having communicate with
and
the
that
courts
is
for you.
imperative who you are
But like she said, there is no case law addressing this part of the law. So that is established in other case laws addressing criminal or other parts of the law, but not family law.
Right.
Lynn and Connie both need to know that our Attorney General, in quotes, has been working at changing the Iowa law, a la codifying the Iowa law, now since Branstad came in probably the first time. But they really went to town when he came in the second time.
To codify what part of it? To codify what?
Right, and so that is
to make
another
amendments to the state constitution.
big issue.
Constitution of Iowa.
Nancy Stillings is one of our greatest advocates for the
Yes.
Constitution. She knows more about how the system
No,
is
I don't,
developed.
but I know where it's been changed.
Right.
And every one of the causes I have been working on through my long career.
But
So
now
that's like
that
another
mostly
thing.
is because of a mandate by Congress recently. So
Well, it's
every
not-
state is changing a lot of the intervention into the CPS involvement. And that's how we got a big red flag one day in one case that the Assistant Attorney General was in, and I was like, how did we raise their, you know, so I did a little bit of investigation, and that was due to a mandate of Congress. So I mean,
Back to the Constitution.
who's the champion? I would have to say right now, my personal opinion, because I have spoken to him personally in a very confidential meeting, and I would have to say Grassley would be your friend right now.
I'm not sure I would agree with that, but
Tom Miller is CEO of Iowa, and Mary Tabor is the crazy queen.
And Jeff Sessions is not ignorant to this at all. He is also very good, the Attorney General of the United States. He is not ignorant to this. Yeah, he is very in the know and continues to be in the know by multiple super PACs around
another
the country.
important thing to understand is that the law is life, liberty, and property until they change it to pursuit of happiness. And in the common law, your family is your property, which has a different meaning, which it doesn't mean what it means today because it's been redefined. So that is the law. When they write codes, they write statutes, they codify the Constitution. Those are all things that are up for debate in the courts as well, because you can contest those as unconstitutional. If they are unconstitutional, they are already void prior to any court orders. So we need to take it back to our natural rights, to our God-given
Common
rights,
law.
and back to binding them by the Constitution. And so just because there's a code, there's a statute, there's a policy, and there's administrative law, the policies for the Department of Human Services is supposed to interpret the law, but they don't follow the policies. The administrative code is also supposed to interpret the greater law, but they don't follow that either. So it
Well,
does
I think
get
we
a
have
little
a
sticky.
definite need to have some ADA events to get more education out there. There's an obvious need. I mean, Iowa is the 50th worst in the country for mental health.
John
So that's
Jay
an obvious
University.
issue of a connection where we can be using. So thank you, ladies. We're definitely, if you are in need of an ADA advocate, that would be Tanya Myers and Melissa Martin right there. If you are looking to become an ADA advocate, please reach out to them as well, as we do need more. There are plenty of people who could use this help. So we're on our last little bit here. I'm going to turn things over. If John would like to speak at all, I would like to give him a little bit of speaking time, and then we're going to invite Nancy Augustine, Toya Johnson, and Travis Grassel up so that we can fly through our 2018 legislative recommendations. Now, we will hopefully have those on our website, I'd like to say within a week, but we are a volunteer organization, so things do move a little slow sometimes, so I'll say about a month. On the same note, along with the 88 events, other events, tomorrow in Clinton, Iowa, if you are able to make it, or if you're at home and able to go there, that'll be at, if I'm correct, 1522 Lincoln Way Drive in Clinton, Iowa. I know the event page is on our Families United Action Network page. Also, we are looking at doing a lobby training day in January. Going to bring in Mark Ludwig, who is an expert from Missouri. So there's a lot happening, a lot more going on. We're going to be we're going to be loud. We're going to make a lot of noise this year, and hopefully we're going to start to see the fruits of these efforts come into play. So, John, I'll invite you up real quick if you're wanting to speak, and then we'll get our recommendations. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just make very few comments. I really came more to listen. I'm one of the 7 Democratic candidates for governor, John Neiderbach. Very interesting, certainly. Learned a lot. Thank you to all the people who stood up and spoke about their personal experiences. And Connie and their presentations were fascinating. I come to this with a little bit different background in that I worked for 15 years for the legislature as a nonpartisan analyst for policy and budget. And then I worked for the Iowa Department of Human Services, mostly doing technology, for 15 years, and was on the Des Moines School Board, so I have the education perspective on some of these issues. Just a couple of comments I would just make. I think Connie's analysis about how the system needs to be totally revamped is, if anything, understated. I've been on the inside in several levels, okay, in that this is really sad hearing all this because, not that surprising, but 25 years ago, yes, embarrassing to talk about having that much history on these things, but 25 years ago, we were discussing the same things.
Yes.
And we thought we were addressing it with something called the Family Preservation Services. Everybody knew these were problems. That it was a gotcha atmosphere, that all the problems have been discussed. I don't need to go over those. So it's kind of distressing to think about how all these things are not new. We try these solutions, incremental improvements are made, and then a budget crisis hits. And those services are the first ones cut, instead of constantly being expanded. And it's talked about how much more money is put into foster care than is put into alternative services. I mean, none of this is new. This is all talked about. I went to a conference that Annie Casey sponsored, but it was a bunch of legislators, I think it was South Carolina, talking all about these issues intensively for 4 days. And none of this is new. This is very depressing to think about. Obviously, feeling kind of bummed. Very candidly, you know, so much of the system, both from the legislative point of view and the executive point of view, is chasing for dollars. Mm-hmm. What can you do to qualify? And there are things that are done that are on the up and up, and there are things that are done that are not on the up and up. Sometimes the feds catch those, sometimes they don't. This is not just confined to child welfare. It's in Medicaid, it's throughout the entire system. Our whole system is so, I hope I'm not offending anybody by using the phrase screwed up, that it is breathtaking how we allow this to happen. You can't change it at the state level alone because obviously there's a lot of federal problem too. It goes to structure, finances, the legal system has been talked about very effectively, much better than I can do, is not people friendly, it is not focused on trying to build people up, it is built on an adversarial context. We need to change that. That is something that could be changed. And a lot of this has been talked about. You need to follow the money. There are an awful lot of people who give an awful lot of donations to an awful lot of politicians. And, for instance, the legal community is very lively in giving money to candidates. You are likely to see a lot of change in the legal process from candidates who take a lot of money from the legal system, because lawyers mostly like the way the system is, because they make a lot of money from it.
Some.
Full disclosure, certainly, and full disclosure, I'm a lawyer too, okay? I'm a lawyer too, although I haven't really practiced ever, well, only pro bono cases. The family advocacy idea is a hugely good idea. And I like the idea of building up an alternative system and taking that to legislators. Trying to just go and tell legislators how bad it is, having worked with a lot of legislators for a lot of years in different contexts, doesn't really pay off. Because they're stuck. They don't know what to do. Well, they can say, well, okay, it's a messed up system. Some things you can cut a program, this you can't cut. And also keep in mind that legislators, particularly in the Midwest, are very, very risk averse. They don't like to do things that are risky. Well, I was on the school board, okay, for 4 years in Des Moines. I was risk averse. You have a higher hurdle to overcome when something is risky, because there's political risk to it, and a lot of times they don't see a lot of benefit. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to sell a better system to legislators. And then also the other problem is it doesn't fit the partisan narrative. And so much of what we're doing right now is all partisan. Everybody is trying to make bullet points against the other side. I don't know how we overcome that.
Coalition government.
Well, right, yes, but in long term. But in the current situation we have, how we try and sell reform, that's why I like Connie's idea. An alternative system might get sold much more easily than trying to change the current system. And last thing I'll say, this is not a cheerful one. Frankly, I don't see things getting worse. Yes. And maybe it is a good one. Maybe it is cheerful to the extent that you can take this out to people and say the case for change is imperative because the system is getting worse. TPRs are up 15%, 16% up in the last 5 years in Iowa. Okay, terminations of parental rights are up. Let me just finish the sentence. There has been a big cut in caseworkers, and I understand there's some reference to that. I'm not saying the solution is to put money back into it without changing the culture, but the problem is the system will keep muddling through. When you have fewer caseworkers, what happens is they do things more quickly. And in terms of not wanting to have a case, like the cases we saw recently in the press, from an individual caseworker's perspective, nobody wants to be that caseworker where the kid gets dies and is in the front page of the paper. So there's going to be pressure to pull kids out faster. That's just my guess, but I've been around this stuff for a long time. So it's a real strong imperative to get this stuff changed soon, and also to put more money into alternative services. I'll stop talking. I try not to make this a partisan speech, because quite honestly, this is a little too emotional for me. My family has had a great deal of contact with the child welfare system, which I won't go into, but extensive high-profile contact. So this is, and this is frankly the first time we've talked about it in public. So it's an extremely personal issue to me. That was handled really badly. I don't want to say this.
You've survived it.
Well, I survived it. Not everybody did. It was handled really badly, and it could have been handled so much better with no cost or just doing things as they should have been done and fully involving all family members in support.
But they didn't want to do it.
Well, And so, you know, it's not a topic I can really talk about on a partisan basis, other than to say it's a very personal issue. And I am not the leading candidate by any stretch. I am not somebody who has millions of dollars to put into my campaign, like some of our candidates do. If I become governor, believe me, it would be a revamp from top to bottom. Because again,
Actually, it's my challenge to any candidate that is stepping in. When you're on the candidacy trail, you should be talking this talk. When you should be talking the solutions. Because this is the band that breaks everything. It crosses party lines. It's not partisan whatsoever. You'll find independents, libertarians, Republicans, Democrats, and every fringe group that there is that has this. And I bet you, if you start talking this, you'll pull way more votes than you ever thought you would.
And tomorrow night, the first opportunity for that is tomorrow night at a dinner in Cedar Rapids to a bunch of Democrats. I will be bringing this up. Yes. Anybody else?
Vote for you in the primary? Is that what you're...
Thank you. June 5th, as I always tell everybody, with 7 months to go, or more than 7 months to go, I always tell people, you know, I'm not asking for anyone's support, okay? It's too early for that. I'm asking for your consideration. By June, hopefully I will merit your support. But just follow the campaign, because this stuff won't get changed by itself. There is all this impediment against change. There is all this natural inertia to keep it as it is. It's going to take folks who are willing to talk about unhappy situations, uncomfortable situations. And all the, candidates who have consultants don't do that because they're paying a lot of money to consultants who tell them, don't go near an issue like this, you can't win. Anyway, thank you.
And some people might want to vote for you. How do you spell your last name? Loudly?
She's done this before. Neiderbach. Neiderbach.
Thank you very much, Sean. Very nice to be getting the support of local community, and more and more of our leaders are beginning to get in tune to this issue. I truly believe that there is not one person in the community that one way or another has not been affected, whether directly dealing with a custodial division, having a TPR, or just being involved in the community with the people that have, and yourself, your family, whoever, it is affecting everybody. So again, we're going to fly through our recommendations. If we could get Nancy, Toya, and Travis on up here real quick. Again, we are going to have a lot more details for these when we get them up online. Today we're just going to briefly discuss the bulletin points, and then that way we can get out of here on time again. Are you coming up, Nancy? Okay. So, should we start first with custodial? Sure. Okay, so with Families United Action Network, we do not give legal advice. We are still in the process of developing the services that we wish to have going. So again, we're a new organization. We have split up into several committees so that people can be in a committee that best suits their talents, their skills, and their area of concern. Not everybody who's dealing with a custodial situation is knowledgeable or interested in the Child Protective Services and vice versa. So we have split into two main committees dealing with Iowa Code 598 and primarily Iowa Code 232. So we are going to go ahead and we will let Travis start off with some of our recommendations for Iowa Code 598. I will say that there are a great deal of many of these recommendations that we have already secured sponsors for. We're going to leave their names off until the bills are filed, and then we will be issuing a giant thank you and getting their names out there at that point.
Hi, thank you very much. As Nick said, my name is Travis Grassel. I've been with Families United Action Network for probably two years now. I'm a father of two boys. I've been through divorce. I've dealt with a lot of families that have seen things happen on the child protection side, and I wasn't even aware of those. And so I think it's great to have someone like Connie here, someone like Lynn here, people that have been through the system, people that are attorneys and know what happens on the other side. I think this is terrific to have so many people here. It's not just a father's rights issue, it's not just a mother's rights issue. It's incredibly widespread, and this is the fabric of our society that we're talking about. This is our children that we're talking about. So there's a lot of emotion in these things, like Lynn said. It is so, so important to get out and advocate, to talk to your people that you know, whether it's legislators or people that are attorneys or involved in DHS, because if we stay quiet, they win. Okay, we have to bring sunlight to this issue, and sunlight is the best disinfectant. So that's what we're here for. As far as our recommendations for child custody issues, the biggest one is we want to promote an equal share parenting bill. This is something that's been promoted to the Senate before, to the House and Senate before. It's passed the House before, but it goes through the Judiciary Committee. We've run into some obstacles. You have, like you said, a lot of money tied to things, Title IV-D and E funding. That money's going to run out if there's equal shared parenting as a foundational starting point. And so when you talk to people, they sound supportive, but then they figure out, oh, we're going to lose all this federal funding tied to our budget if this doesn't happen. And so I think a lot of your parental problems that start happening go away if you implement some sort of equal shared parenting as a foundation. And let parents be parents. That's what we're here for. That's why we have kids. We want to be parents. We're their best role models. And so I think the biggest thing we want to try to push is an equal shared parenting bill to eliminate a lot of the adversarial nature in the court systems and what's going on in the family law system. We've got about 15 total items here, and then you have your own list of items to cover too. So some people that have really been key in the legislative arena are people like Brad Zahn, people like Kim Reiser. We've talked to Governor Kim Reynolds on this issue, Lieutenant Governor Adam Gregg. They are in the know on this stuff, and so it's not like we're not having those conversations. Number two, we'd like the desired definition of best interest of the children, to be talked about better. They use best interest of the children as their market campaign, and they're not doing what's in the best interest of children. Okay, we as parents probably know what's best for them, and so we have to basically ask them to redefine that.
Define it at all.
Yeah. Another thing is when you have parents falling apart, you have one parent is the non-custodial parent or considered the visitor. Okay, that right there creates adversarial nature and more reason to fight. And so we're asking for visitation be changed to parenting time. It just seems like a common sense thing.
And that change right there, sorry to cut you off, but that one's not really going to be too much of an actual visible legislative change. There's not going to be too much impact by changing visitation to parenting time within the bill, but subconsciously the mindset of just the respect that it gives parents. Your parents are not visitors, they are parents. So it should be parenting time rather than visitation time. Sorry to cut you off.
No problem, thank you. Another issue is if you have parents that get divorced or maybe they're not even married, a parent relocates. That's a big problem. And so trying to establish some relocation restrictions would be great. There's something going on in New Jersey that we could possibly implement. We want to review the child support guidelines. We know that the Iowa judicial branch did do this, I believe it was beginning of this year or possibly last year. And there are some new guidelines out there, but it's something that they really need. What happens with child support is there's no accountability to where the funds go. And so if those funds are not being used for the children, then what's the purpose of having child support? And that's kind of the problem with the whole system, is that you don't have accountability, you don't have transparency, and so everything falls apart. Review child support guidelines and the constitutionality of these said guidelines. So that's another piece to what we just talked about with child guidelines. Very important. We've already touched on Title IV-D and E funding. This is something I think that can be addressed at the federal level. A couple years ago, Senator Grassley was down in Norwalk, and I asked him straight up, I said, what can be done about this? And he said, it's not a federal issue, it's a state issue. Wrong. We all know that that's not true. We know that federal funding is causing the problem. And so we have to either defund the federal funding or reallocate the federal funding to family preservation.
And
Rather than
legislators that know the difference.
rather than trying to punish everybody, and find out what's wrong, let's build our communities up. Let's build our parents up, our grandparents up, build up our families, and maybe we'll see society, become better. And that's where, John, you were talking about, what are we going to do to sell this? The selling point is you make a better society. You empower families, and you make a healthier state. You make a healthier nation because you are helping your children by being there for them. You're standing up beside them. If they go into the system, nobody will be there for them in the end. And I tell my boys that all the time. I have a 13-year-old boy and a 10-year-old boy, and I said, you can go to your counselor session, you can go do this, you can go do that, but who will be there for you when you're done? Your mother will be there, and I will be there. That's who's going to be there in the end, and that's what we need to be telling our children. We can't be allowing them to be victims of the system, and I'm sorry to everybody that's been through the system. I was unaware of the issues until about 2 or 3 years ago, and it is eye-opening. And we need more people like everyone in this room to stand up and stick up for what's right, and it's a system that's very, very broken. Let's see.
All right, number 8, recommendations for...
Will these be online?
We are going to get them on our website, which I haven't stated. Our website is familiesunite.org. And again, we have them almost ready to go on there, but due to being a volunteer organization, it does take a little bit longer than normal. So about a month, I'll say that will for sure be there. So our recommendation number 8 here is, I briefly mentioned before, is to change the DHS call-in line, have a study rather with the DHS call-in line to approve the amount of calls that are coming in as retaliatory calls, primarily through the custodial division, so that we have that hard number to say whether it's 10% or, as we are expecting, over 80% of the calls that are starting from being in animosity during a custodial division.
From anonymous to confidential.
No, yeah, our recommendation here from this committee is to have a study done just to see how many of those calls are coming in as retaliatory calls.
And how would you visibility?
How do you know?
How would you know? Well, then it goes back to changing it from anonymous to confidential as part of it, definitely.
Okay, the next 2 are tied to parental alienation, and I think there's arguments to both sides of this. Is this really a term? Is it not? People can argue this, until the cows come home, but essentially, if you have one parent that isn't allowing the other parent to be involved, in layman's terms, that's parental alienation. And so trying to establish a definition for that is very important. So that's one objective. And the other one is establishing consequences for that. If you're going to penalize someone just because they're not going to have their children full time, well, what about the other parent that won't allow the other parent to be there? If there's stuff that can be proven, there really needs to be something that can penalize that, whether it's monetarily or, possibly prison time. But I don't think, we want to do as much as we can to help parents be parents and get rid of all the arguing. Number 11 is simplify the Iowa Code from 7 definitions of father. I think there's just a lot of stuff, as you mentioned, some other people have mentioned this too. You get into these legislative terms, and there's just a lot of information in the law books that's been put there, and it gets confusing. So trying to clarify some of that. Do you want to take number 12?
Yeah, sure. Continued education in family law for attorney, judges, clerks, GALs, and guardian ad litem, and all involved in the family law proceedings. So that's one that's pretty simple. Our association has agreed with that recommendation too. It's just a matter of where do we set that threshold and what will be those requirements. Number 13, this is another area where we have, in theory, agreed with the Bar Association. They've had a bill similar to this the last 2 years, and the main bulletin point we've agreed with, but they've always gone into excessive detail, in our opinion, for the bill, and so we've lobbied against the bill. But allow for the waiver of the 90-day waiting period at court's discretion upon agreement of both parties in a custodial division. So right now, currently, if Travis and I are married, we want to get divorced, we would have to wait 90 days, even if we're in complete agreement. In that 90 days, whether it's a lawyer whispering, a family member, something is very likely to happen to where the agreement level will change to an animosity level and then set you forth on years worth of a court journey and thousands of dollars. So we would like to see, if people are in agreement, done. Move on.
I'll take number 14, and 15 might go with it too. make sure here. Yeah, basically you're talking about punishment for parents not being involved in their lives. If someone, we want to abolish the incarceration for unpaid fines and restitution and child support, and it goes with driver's license too. If you're going to take someone's driver's license away because they're not paying the child support, how can they help their family? How can they help their children? If you're going to put them in prison because they've done something wrong that's fairly minor, you're making the system even worse. You're making children foster kids, and that's not going to help the situation. So we need to do everything we can to empower parents, let them keep their driver's license, let them try to educate them rather than punish them so much. And that's really what's going on with some of these incarceration issues with not paying child support or drug-related issues or some of the cases involving domestic issues. And granted, there are a lot of them that are real out there, but there are also a lot of fabrication going on because there's money tied in the system to winning. Whoever's the best liar, who's ever the most aggressive, is going to win in the system, and they're going to get the kids. The kids need both parents. They need their whole family on both sides, the mother's side, the father's side. And I think we're doing a real disservice to everyone in the public if we're going to keep this lie going and not raise awareness and put some sunlight on the issue, more so than we ever have before.
Well, and again, if you go back to our first cornerstone recommendation with that shared or collaborative parenting, that's already going to reduce the amounts of child support that are coming in because you are splitting those expenses and that time and everything that goes with it. And there's been over 200 studies done, not one that has gone against shared parenting. Everything has reinforced it time and time again. That it will not only help that child, but it will help the animosity to go down, that the problems that were so huge when you're married or going through all this battle, once you come to that agreement, they just fall by the wayside and you worry about collaborating for your child. And so, again, we've already discussed in detail a lot today about poverty. Many times that these people will be doing everything that they can to pay their child support and keep a roof over their head and everything else. And if you are just that little bit late, then that third month you're getting that notice that your license can be taken. And so you take the license. Well, what's going to happen then? Then you're going to probably lose your job. Then what's going to happen? You're deeper in debt now. So now they still haven't paid. So now they're going to try and take you, put you in prison for not paying this child support. Meanwhile, still charging you for all that time, but expecting that you're going to just magically hit the Powerball numbers and be able to pay that off when you get out or something. And all it is just this repetitious cycle. And again, so by taking that driver's license away, it does in no way empower the individual, the child, the family, or the community. It just helps to hinder us and to hold us back. We do not have an exact bill drafted for this yet, but some ideas we've talked about would be employer tax credits for instead of garnishments, but if you could just, if the person is making it, that their payments, that employer could essentially get some tax credits back to keep them employed rather than take their license, fire them, etc., etc. Again, we have a long way to go with that one. We can see the overall recommendation clearly, but how to fine-tune that into a legislative bill is still in process.
And that also affects foster care recovery.
If you go back to the Department of Justice letters from March of 2016, which I know several cases, it's been very successful in applying that to avoid all those consequences right now. The problem again is they don't follow the law. So that's the main thing, is we need to enforce that law because they are doing it like Nick is saying right now, regardless of the law.
So those are our 15 recommendations for Iowa Code 598. Again, these will be on our website of familiesunite.org, hopefully within the month in greater detail. And the ones that we have sponsors for, hopefully they will be filed at that point so we can have their picture and a nice thank you at that point too.
I would also say too that when a parent goes to jail for not paying the child support, they are charged per day for being in jail, and that keeps their license even longer.
It's a form of debtor's prison, which has already been ruled unconstitutional. Yes.
Before Toya gets started, does this purse belong to anyone in the room now?
Okay. Thank you, Nan. So again, Iowa Code 232 is a lot bigger of a code, a chapter, and it has taken a considerable amount of time just even discussing these issues within our own committees. Toya has really put some work in it. She has completely rewritten the code, or rather even modified it to our vision here. And then we have broken it down into some subsections of some main areas that we would like to hit. So,
thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it, your time and your stories.
Louder, please.
Our first recommendation is to abolish CPS as it stands now and come up with a standing agency. We believe that, number one, and what we're calling this, we came up with the name the Iowa Child Safety and Family Preservation Act of 2018. And so I believe that we're going to stick with that name, and we're going to be lobbying and submitting bills that include this comprehensive Preservation Act. The first thing, so let's get to that. This Iowa Child Safety and Family Preservation Act of 2018 is to ensure child safety by using evidence-based methods that remove the risk of harm, not the child, from the biological family. Ensure that the familial rights guaranteed by the U.S. and Iowa constitutions will be upheld by revisions to Iowa Code 232 and 600. Recognize that current federal funding programs create a perverse incentive to family preservation. And lastly, create new ways to redirect funding, allowing for the best outcomes for children, families, and taxpayers. The way that we broke this down was that there were several different areas, as we all know. So we thought about the legislative responsibilities. They need to have continuous oversight, independent audits, comprehensive rewrites of Chapter 232, divisions of services and termination agencies. So within that agency, if you're going to do that, it needs to be two separate agencies that do not work together. And create or give current agencies the ability to inquire, investigate, and sanction the department, such as our ombudsmen, our civil and human rights commissions, and any of those that deal with family rights. The Department of Human Services' role is to be a service agency, and so they need to change their public image. They need to reassign child abuse investigations to other agencies, establish consistent and statewide best policies and practices, establish an online statewide directory of social services resources, both private and state funded. It also needs to establish a code of ethics for their employees and comply with Iowa's drug-free workplace, identification badges for all workers and their vehicles, annual training, consequences for failures to comply, rename employee positions to be in alignment with the service agency role, assist employees in obtaining licensing, and preferably keeping one family with one social worker at a time. We also believe that they need to redefine or define child abuse. We also need to define future risk of harm and create a satisfactory definition of parental alienation and judicial alienation as well. We believe that the child abuse reporting should be confidential and not anonymous. There's no sense to have rules on the books that talk about prosecuting people for false reports if you don't collect the data to know when a false report is being made. We also believe that we need to redefine those people who can actually request the registry reports. We believe that foster and adoptive parents should have the same standards as the public when being placed on the registry, no plea deals for them. Court-appointed attorneys may be used for abuse appeals, and sub-classifications determined by the level of offense for particular sexual offenses. Child abuse investigations that contain a criminal element should be investigated by the appropriate law enforcement agency. There's no reason that the Department of Human Services should be conducting criminal investigations. Another thing is we believe that families should have a family assessment, or we should be using our families in need of assistance. Many times when a complaint comes through, it's a family that's in crisis, and many times it's because they lack access to the resources that are needed to have their family have some stability. And so we also believe that if the Department of Human Services wants to recommend services, they need to provide at cost to the department the services that they are recommending.
Quality services too.
And quality services, definitely. As far as removals are concerned, we need to create a satisfactory definition and codify what imminent danger is. We need to create a satisfactory definition and codify what reasonable efforts are. And we need to verify that reasonable efforts were signed. We need to verify reasonable efforts with signed forms completed under penalty of perjury. At this time, anybody can make a complaint for or China, and they don't have to sign off that it's under penalty of perjury. But if you do anything, it is under penalty of perjury every time you submit a document to our court system. So that definitely needs to be changed, and they need to be held at the same level of accountability. And children may not be removed from satisfactory placement for monetary reasons. We also talked about preventing the removal of newborns. We want to encourage the establishment of paternity within the first year of life, if possible. Repeal the laws that say paternity rights go to the husband if the birth mother is married, because we've seen instances where, mom is stepping out, has a baby, and now this baby is the husband's, but it's not. DNA testing should be covered as a medical expense to be shared by both biological parents. Termination of rights and adoptions cannot proceed without each biological parent being given full due process under the law. Positive drugs testing results should be confirmed by a medical review officer. Our private sector here in Iowa has a medical review officer. If you're going to look for a job in the private sector, that should be the same standard that's applied when we're talking about taking our most valuable assets. Sweat patches should be outlawed, and there's many other, such as the hair test, because it's biased against African Americans, it's biased against minorities. People's hair don't grow at the same standards, so the standards that are being used right now for hair tests are inadequate to adequately address whatever issue may be there. Also, the body does not process illegal from legal drugs any different. So when you're taking a test of the hair, it doesn't say, oh, you took Tylenol, or you had a dental procedure done. It just says maybe cocaine or amphetamines. It doesn't say that you had a cold, and so a medical review officer would definitely be the person that would help distinguish what are the mitigating circumstances.
There's no accurate timeline.
Exactly.
And the Navy isn't even using them any longer.
Right. We also say that you need to require due process in all removals, even when the parent had a previous removal. Each case, as their director has said, is supposed to be looked at independently. However, we know that is not the case, as they use the example or excuse to remove children because a parent had a previous removal is why they're coming in. So we're saying that it needs to be enforced, and that there needs to be a standard that each removal is pertinent to the information of that case right then and there. Placements. We would like to see a legal parental directive, preferably completed by parents at birth. So we would like to see our hospitals offering a advanced parental directive that says, in the ability I'm unable to parent, here is a list of the people that are going to take care of my child. We also believe that if an advanced parental directive is in play, that it supersedes any DHS involvement or placement. We also believe that there should be the ability to create a temporary power of attorney for placement preferences. We believe that the notice to relatives should be sent within 5 days of the initial date of removal. That parent approval needs to be for placements, because parents, know this, you still have your rights even when your children are not in your physical custody. You still have rights to your kids, and many people are tricked out of using the rights that they have. So that's very imperative that you know that. The other thing is placing the child with a non-custodial parent. So say you have a divorced couple and they take the kids from mom. Dad hasn't done anything, or mom hasn't done anything. So the parent who's not offending should automatically have their children given to their custody. No ifs, ands, buts about it. The parent that doesn't, the parent that is being accused, now you can deal whatever you're going to deal with them, but however that needs to happen. We also said bringing a relative in to care for the children shall be a priority, and that can be with or without the parent present. So instead of removing the child from their familiar surroundings, we're advocating, like our law says in 232, that a relative or a family of the friend of the family may be brought into the home to care for the children in their own homes. And so we'd like to see that happen more often. We believe that that should be a first priority. We also believe that relative placement should be a priority. Placing siblings together should be a priority. So if you have a relative who can take all of the kids at once, that should be the first placement where the children are placed. We also believe that investigations and family assessments of foster and adoptive parents have the same standards as biological parents. You cannot hold them to another standard. If you took the child from this parent, the biological parent, for the same thing that you, it should be the same reason for an adoptive parent. So if there's beaten marks on them, then they should be taken from them as well. We believe for foster care, making a diligent, verified effort to place with relatives or verified friends, make a diligent and verified effort to ensure that children of Native American descent, immigrant populations, and faith-based placement is a priority. Because as we know, children are traumatized already, so we definitely want to try to lessen the amount of traumatization that they are receiving. We believe that there should be a new category for relative foster care to be added to our state plan, which will qualify us for Title E funding by redirecting the funds from incentives related to terminations towards family placement and services. We would like to create separate training models for foster, relative foster, and guardianship or adoption. We'd like to create therapeutic foster care with more training and pay to reduce group homes, and create subsidized guardianships to be used in place of foster, shelter, and group placement. And we would like to see the enforcement of placements of sibling groups unless there is a problem between the siblings and they cannot be placed together. For due process, we do believe that that we should be doing waivers to qualify for Title IV funding by replacing China proceedings with child welfare mediations, which could also double as family team meetings. We also believe that GALs should be replaced with CASAs, whose main goal is the voice of the child. GAL has money at stake, so we don't believe that they do their best to voice the child's wishes and directives. And we believe that there should be uniform documents statewide so that there's a uniform procedure across the state, and enforcement of the rules and regulations can be handled a little more efficiently. We believe that all services should be voluntary because the Department of Human Services is just that, a Department of Human Services. They are not Department of Human Law. Anyway, parents and DHS should be working on ways to create a service plan that brings stability to the family. We also believe that the services and the providers should be chosen by the parents, and excess funds in the DHS budget should be used to improve services and access to those services by families. We also believe that services should equal that of adoptive parents. So if you're going to give the adoptive parents all these subsidies, any parent that's involved in a DHS case should have access and should have those subsidies granted to them as well. We also believe that there should be specialized services that may be provided as part of a service plan, such as funds for education, remodeling their homes, or housing itself, transportation, and other requests made by the department or the family that would meet the needs of the family. We move to termination of parental rights. We want to create a satisfactory definition of parental rights. Because how are you terminating parental rights and there's no legal definition of parental rights? It makes absolutely no sense. We said that all involuntary terminations are unconstitutional. Use of guardianships instead of termination. So we believe instead of terminating the parent, because there are 9 states as it currently stands that allow parents to have their rights reinstated after a termination. We believe that there should be guardianships so that if it does take a parent a little bit longer to get to that point of taking care of their child solely, that there'll be the ability to go back and easily correct things. As far as adoptions are considered, biological families are forever homes. 2, open adoptions for state-initiated adoption. So if the state has forced you to give your child up, then it should be open records. Also, adoption subsidy payment should be based upon the family's needs. So if you've got a millionaire couple out in Johnston, they don't need the same services that a family who has 6 kids needs. And so why are we paying them additional funding when they don't need the funding in the first place, when there are families who could use the funding? Abolish internet advertising of children available for adoption. It promotes sex trafficking. It promotes picking up the children. It's just an unsafe practice, and we have heard cases where parents found out that their children were adopted or up for adoption online. We also would like to limit the number of adopted children in a home. Annual doctor visits should be required if they are children that are adopted out. Permission to homeschool if you are adopted, if you're an adopted family or a foster family and you want to homeschool, there needs to be permission as these children are DHS involved. Because we believe you should be able to homeschool, but if you're DHS involved, then you don't have that same privilege because you're not the biological parent, you're a substitute. We also believe that the original birth certificate should remain on the record. We believe that adoption certificate should be used in the place of adoption so that they can still invoke the proper rights to take care of your children. We believe that children should maintain their first and middle names, and preferably their last names as well. However, at least their first and middle names. We believe that relative adoptions should have minimum home study requirements because these are people that they've known, and unless there is really a reason for investigation, that these children should be placed with their family members. And we believe that children's medical records and social history shall be disclosed prior to the adoption so that adopting families and foster parents know what type of child they're getting into and what's happened, this child's backstory, so that they can know and respond accordingly when the child has questions. Adoptive parents willing to take sibling groups together shall have priority placement. So, like we once said, if they can take all 3, 4 kids, however many children it is, that should be the placement. As far as the process itself, we believe that there should be reviews of the system as well as the people who run the system. And we believe that there's also remedies and things that can be done for restitution if there's violations. We believe that all cases scheduled for termination of parental rights must be reviewed by regional supervisors before DHS and recommend a termination. And what we're hoping to see is an independent board established so that each termination that is asked for is reviewed. We also like to say no child support order for services provided that would have otherwise been provided to the general public, such as child care, transportation costs, or housing costs. Parents should be reimbursed for unnecessary or completion of the department's recommended services, such as negative drug tests, personality and psychological testing, or unnecessary parenting classes, any unnecessary type of service that the parent has completed. If they paid out of their pocket, they should be reimbursed for it. Malpractice insurance for each social worker, because we believe, like the police should be doing this too. You are bound by the Constitution as soon as you knock on my door. And because you are violating those things, you should be forced to carry malpractice insurance like any other profession who has a malpractice, who could have a malpractice claim against them. We also believe that other avenues and remedies need to be discussed and explored. We'd like to see some outcomes, and so we'd like for the department to create an ongoing study into the effective outcomes of those on the lives that are served by the Department of Human Services. And what that basically means is we want to see what's happening. We want to see if you're actually recommending services that are 1, appropriate, 2, that can be completed, and 3, are necessary to bring family stability. And prevention dollars should be allocated in proportion to abuse categories reported. So if you're saying that neglect is 72%, then we need to be having 72% of the budget dedicated to addressing prevention for neglect. And stewardship of public funds. We believe that research all child welfare, protection, or abuse funding allocated to any agency, nonprofit, business, or other entity for efficient use of funding. But we also want to see a reduction in the conflict of interest. You can't be the owner of a adoption agency and a social worker or some kind of work, because that creates a total conflict of interest and it incentivizes people to keep families apart. Those are our 2018 recommendations for the Iowa Child Safety and Family Preservation Act of 2018. Thank you.
Obviously, you can tell we didn't just put that together overnight last night. We've been working on this for quite some time. And in order to even be successful at even one of these recommendations, again, like we've said over and over today, we need to be loud. We need your support. We need to stay organized. Again, we're going to be doing more events starting tomorrow. Iowa Family Preservation Project, along with us co-hosting at 1522 Lincoln Way in Clinton, Iowa. We're going to get some ADA events together, some lobbyist training events with Mark Ludwig in January. So there's going to be lots to do to stay involved, to stay active. We understand that you have a life, that poverty is an issue, that there's many things that will draw you away from this. This is definitely emotionally tolling work. But every little bit that anybody can put in will get us miles farther ahead. So again, our website is familiesunite.org. If you got $1, you can donate better. A 20 is even better yet. We have different groups and committees that, like we see here, to make our recommendations. So getting a hold of us to join those, becoming an ADA advocate. There's plenty of ways that you can be instrumental in making these changes. And honestly, we can't do it without you. We need everybody to step up and be involved. With that, I think I'm going to at least turn off the cameras today, and we'll call this an adjourn for today. I know some of the people here might have other questions, and we can go ahead and mingle for a little bit. But if you're watching at home, again, thank you very much, and have fun.
Okay, wrong phone. Mine died a long time ago, yeah?